So we're at part 4 of this little mini-series, and we're back in the West again. If you've missed the last 3 videos, you should go watch them, but let's get into this one. First up for us today are the Phoenix Suns. The Suns went on a crazy run in the bubble, going 8-0 to finish off a very promising season. They ended with a 34-39 record, which shows a lot of promise. The additions of Rubio and Baines proved to be well worth it, and it's not crazy to say that the Suns have a real shot of making the playoffs next year. Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson are coming into their own as players, and they'll have DeAndre Ayton for 25 more games next year. The only guys they have expiring are Aaron Baines and Dario Saric, both of which could re-sign for a decent price. But if they don't, that leaves the Suns with a decent amount of cap space, around $17 million if the cap stays the same. Well, minus $4 or $5 million from the first round pick this year, but still, they have a little over $10 million to get somebody with. But who should they go after? They're currently lacking a backup point guard, no disrespect to Javon Carter, Eli Okubo, Ty Jerome, or any other point guard they might have on the roster. But what these guys need, if they're going to make the playoffs, is an experienced veteran, not a project off the bench. So why don't they throw $12 million at Goran Dragic? Phoenix's outlook is a playoff team, and if you throw him $12 million annually for 3 or 4 years, that might be enough to drag him away from Miami. Miami is a big player in the 2021 free agency, and if someone offers Dragic a pretty decent deal long term, they might not be able to match that and maintain cap space for next year's free agency. Dragic would provide a lot of the same things that Rubio does, just in a different kind of way. I think this could be a really good move for the Suns, and I hope they do it because I want to see them in the playoffs next year. So moving on from one young team to the next, we have the Memphis Grizzlies, who were the 9th seed this year. Unlike the Suns though, these guys have no cap space, in part to eating Dion Waiters' contract last year, but that doesn't mean they can't attract a decent player for a mid-level type contract. But what does this team need? They have a really solid starting lineup with Ja, Dylan Brooks, Justice Winslow, Triple J, and Valanciunas. They also have some solid guys off the bench like Tyus Jones, Brandon Clark, and DeAnthony Melton. Oh, and Gorgie Jang is still there, so that's their backup big. Again, as I said with the Suns a minute ago, they need a veteran. There also happens to be a gritty guy named Wilson Chandler in the unrestricted free agent market. He wasn't good for Brooklyn last year, and he has a history of being a decent three-point shooter and a decent defender at either forward spot. Although since he is a little older now, he might be better suited for the 4, but that's for the coaches to decide. I think for a team that largely has their group, Chandler will be good for the young guys and be able to soak up a few minutes here or there, and shouldn't be a liability on either side of the floor, and could provide something in the locker room, maybe on the court as an enforcer. Who really knows? But to me, it seems like a pretty decent option for them. But next up is the Portland Trail Blazers, who made the playoffs this year thanks to them going nuclear. But what can they do next season to stay competitive? First of all, they have to stay healthy. That alone would probably put them at a 4 or 5 seed. But they also need some help on the roster. Honestly, largely their improvements have to come from trades, because even if they don't guarantee Ariza's whole contract, which I don't think they should, they have like $10 million maybe in cap space. But who can they get for around $10 million that would be a real difference maker? I mean, they need wings desperately, but there aren't really any ones available that could fill their needs. So why don't we focus on a backup center since they don't have one? If they really want to get a defensive wing, they'll have to look at the trade market. But for a backup center, there is a perfect candidate, and that's Derek Favors. He's very solid defensively and won't expect a bunch of post-up touches or chase blocks, unlike certain centers on the Blazers roster last year. The only question for me is if Derek Favors will want more than $9 or $10 million annually for a few years. I'm not sure how much the Pelicans will offer him or how much he favors the Blazers situation, but I think he could be a really solid contributor for a teetering Portland team. But let's move on to a way more fun team in the Dallas Mavericks, who are more or less a complete team at this point. They have a ton of guys on the roster, and the only thing this team is missing is a real sixth man or defensive presence. But the offense is so good, it hardly matters. Their lineups are pretty much set, but there's a guy I have in mind for one of their roster spots. That's Aaron Baines. The Suns may re-sign him, yes, but Dallas definitely would have a strong shot if they offered him. They're able to use the room exception if they want to offer him a decent amount of money, as long as they don't go over a certain amount of the cap. So who knows if they'd actually want to do that, or maybe if they'd want to sign somebody and then use their mid-level to get him. But seeing what Baines did for the Suns this season makes me think he can do as good, if not better, in a Dallas system with a fantastic player like Luka. They had a historic offense last season, and Baines would only further that. while also providing some pretty decent defense. I mean, honestly, there's no way to go wrong with this move unless injuries become a problem like they kinda did last year, but that would be a wait and see type of thing. Either way, I think this is a great move and I would love to see it. For the final team of the video, we've got the Utah Jazz, who had their own Donovan Mitchell come into his own in the playoffs. But that's really one of the only positive things we can say about this team, as they don't have any cap space or depth. Maybe Mike Conley improves, but I really don't know. Rudy Gobert's pending free agency next season is also troubling. But that's all in the future. What about next season? What can they do in free agency to help get some depth? They have a mid-level as far as I know, and that can be split between a couple players if you want to do that. I think that's exactly what these guys should do. So in that case, I've got two guys in mind who I think will be okay for about $3 million annually. Michael Carter-Williams and Pat Connaughton. Neither of these guys are world beaters, but for the Jazz, a team with non-existent depth, having a playmaker and solid defender in MCW, as well as a solid wing in Pat Connaughton will go a long way. Look, I love Gorgeous Niang, if that's how you pronounce it, and Nigel Williams-Goss as much as the next guy, but the Jazz need some actual NBA players here to capitalize on Donovan Mitchell's pending stardom. But that's it for this video. If you got this far and you liked it, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. I would really appreciate it. If you didn't like it, leave a dislike. And y'all have a good one.